welcome to another episode of the Turn Up podcast, talking your Houston Texans straight from the Great British Isles. We're continuing our off-season series here while we try and understand a little bit more about these rookie classes. And so far this year, we've been around a couple of guys, and this one's going to be even more pertinent because we went double LSU with Austin Deculus and, of course, Derek Stingley at third overall, and we're still waiting to find out about these guys as training camp preseason rolls around. But Lonn Phillips Sullivan from the LSU Odyssey is joining me. How are you?
What's up? How you doing, sir?
I'm good.
Thank you.
I'm good. Thank you for your time. I appreciate it. I was recommended to Lonn by another podcast. They said he's the main man to speak to. So what is your view of LSU football right now? It's kind of been from the highs and the lows and everything in between the last 3 years.
Oh man, covering the last few years, right when I started writing about LSU, I've always been an LSU fan, but I haven't always written LSU football stuff. I was writing novels and screenplays and all sorts of stuff. And I started writing soccer stuff, some AKA football, as I like to call it, but soccer, as we'll say on this for everyone's sake. Um, but then I started wanting to write LSU stuff, and then right then the Joe Burrow era happened, and it was crazy. It was a wild, epic ride, and you're seeing still the fruits of that team in the draft. 10 guys drafted, some of them. I think most of those players had roots in that 2019 team, had a championship ring on their finger from that season, including the two guys that you drafted. And from those epic highs, Coach Ed Orgeron, everyone's saying this guy is going to be coach for life. He fits LSU like a glove. Everything was perfect seemingly, but then behind closed doors, you have not only the scandals with Ed Orgeron, but you had the scandals with Les Miles in the previous regime, and you got just scandal after scandal piling up. Then in 2020, you have so many players in and out. I mean, people were worrying that Stingley was going to be one of those players opting out. So many guys transferring, opting out. A great, huge, almost biblical exodus from the Tigers for a few years there. It was pretty crazy. But things after LSU last year had just one of the most injury ravaged seasons I've ever seen for a college football team. Um, After that, the worst season we've had in the 21st century, worst season since 1999, first under 500 season. Things are looking up when you finally got rid of that cancerous culture under Ed Orgeron, got rid of Ed Orgeron. You brought in Brian Kelly, who I think is a smart hire, and it looks like LSU, you know, will they be immediately back to a national championship program? That who we'll see. But here's the thing: LSU always is full of surprises, always wins national championships when people aren't betting with them. So the future I think is bright under Brian Kelly.
And obviously, he was kind of tweaking his accent as he spoke to the basketball. If anybody hasn't seen that, he kind of, and then he later followed it up by saying, "I'm from Boston and we don't have an accent," which was kind of doubled down on his on a bit of comedy value. But he's a
Oh yeah.
well-respected coach, Brian Kelly. He's obviously been in Notre Dame a long time. Solidified them as a big program. Despite lack of affiliation, etc., in terms of divisions and what have you. So in terms of the future under Brian Kelly, and was it just because it was a complete departure from Orderon and his Go Tigers or all that kind of stuff? Was that the was that the thought behind it, or what do you think? Kind of, it was a safe pair of hands, was it, or what do you think was the kind of thought behind the Kelly move?
All the above. Seriously,
Yeah.
all the above. You had to have a complete reversal, even down to those type of details. The Go Tigers. That's not even done anymore. Like you don't see Go Tigers even being said by the fans. It at first under Brian Kelly was everywhere, but then it just slowly, once Kelly kind of made sure everyone knew that like that's gonna be dead as our slogan right now. It just there was so many just really interesting brand tweaks that Kelly was doing, but at the same time, it's more just about this hard-nosed culture that's going to really up LSU competitively. Let's LSU had so much talent the last few years, especially going into the NFL draft, but at the same time, just completely inconsistent on the field, completely inconsistent, wildly inconsistent. That was down to the coaching. And I think Kelly, along with Kelly, bringing in a bunch of new coaches, it's going to re-energize the program. I think it's going to take LSU up a level from where it was, and the culture stuff off the field that goes hand in hand with everything. Academic problems, of course, the sexual assault allegations, and the lawsuits that are impending, never ending. They had to get rid of that. LSU, Scott Woodward, they had to get rid of that. Brian Kelly was the perfect choice, in my opinion. Lincoln Riley was the sexy choice, but he was not the right guy for the job.
Yeah.
Brian Kelly's proving to be by showing us a different side of himself than we've ever seen really before, like you've said.
Yeah, no, definitely. And in terms of the, obviously, it's become the Wild West in many senses, the college football landscape. You got the, now it's legal, NIL impact. You've obviously got the transfer portal, and I heard somebody yesterday talking about if you wanted to speak to a running back in the portal, you had to pony up 50K just to even get in with a chance of speaking with a running back. Who that was, I'm not quite clear, but yeah, it's basically flipped the board in terms of recruiting, and then or a fluid ability to move about teams, and guys staying at the same program is no longer there. Do you think that's going to benefit or hinder LSU?
That can be both because I've seen it. Right the second the transfer thing was unleashed, LSU benefited hugely. Joe Burrow coming in, still probably will be the most heralded transfer of all time until someone can top those records. LSU, the ultimate benefactor from the transfer portal. Damian Lewis was a huge part of that offensive line that was protecting Joe Burrow at right guard, right next to your guy Austin Deculus on that 2019 offensive line, Joe Moore award-winning offensive line. But LSU has profited from the transfer portal. LSU has profited from this Wild West type of atmosphere with NIL. But at the same time, we've also Eli Ricks going to Alabama, Kayshon Boutte almost being taken from us to Alabama. A lot of guys opting out. That was in 2020 was more because of the culture and less than like NIL enticements and the changes of college football. It was more to do with what was going on at LSU and the problems there. And some of those players' personal problems that were just happening at LSU. They needed to get a clean situation and get out of there. But yeah, it's been very interesting for LSU with dealing with all of these changes. I think you're going to see this happen for every school. You're going to see it. It just depends on what players you like at the end of the day, and who's your favorite player, because that guy might be gone a week from now. If the portal's open, if the rules are there, if the eligibility is there, if the right kind of offers are there.
Yeah, no, yeah, no. I think he's certainly put a new complexion on. I think when you're watching guys, I was coming at the draft. You think, oh yeah, that guy, and then he's moved to somewhere else, and yeah, it's made an already kind of fragmented landscape even more so. And I think yeah, the change will continue, and you understand the reasons why. But yeah, we'll monitor that. I think this year, and we'll see where it takes us. But college football's certainly a fluid process right now. Derek Stingley, third overall. Somewhat of a surprise in some senses, less so in others. It was a strange draft class this year. Wasn't quite your cookie cutter type, top end prospects and then sort of kind of clear tiers of players. But the Texans sat at third overall, picked Derek Stingley. Was that a surprise from where you sit, Lon, in terms of going that high?
I you know I don't want to be biased at all, but like just talent wise, he was the best corner of the draft. And if he had been able to play offense, special teams like they had planned at LSU, he may have been the best overall player for this draft. Just athleticism, and just going off the page. I mean, he just came back from a Liz Frank injury, and he's setting these, less than a 4.4 on the 40 time. All these type of crazy numbers on his pro day. All these questions people had about his speed, all these things. Stingley answered them coming back from this injury. I just find it interesting how much doubt Derek Stingley has been given. And, Sauce Gardner, many said this guy is the best corner. This guy is the best corner in this draft. Derek Stingley Jr., he's boomer bust, boomer bust. No, Derek Stingley Jr., you had to find that out. You had to find that out. That guy can be the cornerstone of something special. I mean, just the way he took away the field for that 2019 defense. And, people want to look at that 2019 defense and say that 2019 defense was porous, but it's really because Joe Burrow and that offense were flying so high, going so fast that they had to play so many damn drives out there. And, 130 targets, 50 catches allowed, and, basically more or less just 2 full seasons at LSU, even though he was there for 3, more or less just 2, basically. Stingley, he also led college football defenders that year, wins above average, 0.94. The closest defender next to him was like 0.60, 37% completion rate in 2019. Just went up just a bit, 45% completion rate in 2020. Surrendered just 4 catches on back shoulder throws, according to Pro Football Focus College. Stingley, for all the questions, I actually think people talk about him. He's this quiet guy. He's reserved. I actually see a fighter. Look at that Seth Williams play. The Seth Williams play against Auburn. Okay. Seth Williams is, him and Seth Williams are kind of having this duel, and they had this duel for 2 seasons now. And he makes a big catch on Stingley. He's turning. He's gonna go score a touchdown on Derek Stingley. He's already made the completion on Derek Stingley Jr. Stingley punches the ball out from behind while like attacking Seth, throwing him out of bounds. The ball's like rolling right to his foot. He picks it up. It's one of the craziest plays. One of the craziest plays, just barely denying a touchdown and it becoming a fumble recovery touchback from Stingley. And it just shows his fight. And I can show you miles and miles of footage of him one-on-one against Jamar Chase, Justin Jefferson, Terrace Marshall, Eric Gilbert, where he's just playing against guys that are going to demand everything you've got on every play. And so, Stingley has that in him. At the same time, Stingley has shown a propensity at times to allow some big plays and some weak sauce kind of passes his way. Like, look at the first of the 2020 Missouri game. I think Connor Bazelak completes like 5 straight passes on Stingley at one point. And it's like Stingley's just playing off coverage, soft, letting the guy catch it 5 yards, boom, make a move on him, kind of weak kind of tackling. You saw that against UCLA last year where he makes that horrible whiff at the end zone. So, Stingley, he's definitely got to stay, he's got to keep going on this. He's got to stay hot, because if he lets it loose, if he kind of lets go of what the type of possessive talent that he has, I just think it would be a really big regret, really big shame to not see Stingley fly as high as he possibly could. Also on special teams too. You got someone who could be really special for Houston here.
Yeah, what sort of role do you think he can play on fourth down?
Sorry, what was that?
What kind of role do you think he can play on special teams?
That's the thing, man. That's the thing. At LSU, we wanted to find that question out. We saw it so rarely, so few, but at the same time, this is someone who he's a born playmaker. When you look at like his high school numbers, it was something like every 3.2 touches or something. I remember writing an article on it a few years back, but every like 3.2 touches or something, he was scoring a touchdown. in high school. Like rushing the ball, receiving the ball, playing the quarterback wildcat style. This is someone who's just an absolute freak with the ball in his hands, whether it's returning an interception, picking up a fumble, or punt returns, kickoff returns. He could be absolutely dynamite. I'm not saying he's the next Devin Hester, but I wouldn't be shocked if he had at least one or two return touchdowns his first rookie season. I would not be shocked by that at all.
Yeah, no, interesting. I've not seen a lot about that, so yeah, interesting caveat to or wrinkle to the team you could potentially add. I think when you look at the good tape in 2019, and you talked about some of that there, what do you think made it so good, or what was his best aspect on the field?
His length, the way he can utilize his body, the way he basically just blankets that receiver and just basically mirrors him. He knows their moves. He's got them in his back pocket. He's basically got everything that his father has been training him since birth. This is something that has just run in his family generationally, and he's got that same athleticism. You watch some of his father's footage; it's kind of weird. It's kind of eerie because it looks like Derek. The way he uses his body, the way he moves, it's very interesting. It's very it's kind of hilarious. But yeah, Derek Stingley Jr. The way he forces the quarterback to make just hideous passes, the way he makes the quarterbacks just second guess themselves. Watch what he did to Trevor Lawrence and Tua Tagovailoa in 2019. In those big games, it's not even the interceptions against Georgia that he had. Of course, he's going to have two picks on Jake Fromm. Of course, we expect that from Derek Stingley Jr. But it's what he did against Tua. And, yes, he had that trip, the fall over play where he falls over and Devonta Smith takes advantage of that. But if you really look at that game, Tua had 19 incompletions in that game. And so many of them are errant throws to the side of Derek Stingley's field, or he wants to throw that. It's not open. And then he goes Christian Fulton's way, and then Fulton makes a play on the ball. And the same thing with Trevor Lawrence in that championship game. So many incompletions on key downs that just cost them the game. So here's the thing. Stingley doesn't even have to have interceptions to really be effective. If you look at what happened from 2019 to 2020, even 2021, the few games we saw, I think he's was even better in coverage. We just saw so little of it because he had so few opportunities. And when, say like the first of the Missouri game where he was kind of picked on, I think that's him falling asleep, getting complacent, and just, going through the motions. I'm Derek Stingley Jr. They're not going to throw the ball my way. Oh crap. And then kind of reacting slowly to it and kind of being soft about it. I think if he can stay hard nosed, Stingley can really be something special for Houston.
Yeah, in terms of you talked about his father there, and one thing I picked up on the draft was it was almost a quite relaxed acceptance of being picked third overall, as if this was always expected, this was always in the plan. Would expect nothing less, and I think there's part of me that thinks, well, that's the kind of type of attitude and mentality you need at the cornerback position, because every corner is
Exactly.
going to get beat. You're going to have bad plays, you're going to slip up, like you mentioned there. But had he checked out, had he, I know the Liz Frank injury was obviously unfortunate. There's obviously some bad plays in his final year at LSU. But do you think he had checked out, or was it just a case of the program, as you said, the culture issues, all that kind of stuff on her? Plus, not being on as a talented team, not being successful, did that compound? And I suppose that would be the concern for Texans fans because this year and next year likely there's going to be some tough times sprinkled in there. So does he have the mentality to cope with that? And was there more to it than just injuries?
That is an interesting question. That's a great question because very provocative question because there's so many questions about what happened with, the first game of the season in 2020, Mississippi State. Why were you out that game? What happened? The medical emergency. And there's a lot of questions about, everyone knew he was hurt in 2020. He had repeated ankle problems. Everyone understood that. Get the surgery, and then 2021, we thought that it was over with and it was fine. Going into fall camp, he had a reoccurrence of that problem. bam, right there, first of fall camp, bam. And he was basically going into that UCLA game probably at like 40%. And so he kept playing on it, hurt himself a few different times, made some plays, had, 3 or 4 games, I think it was, and then he was done. And many were saying, did he quit on the team? Did he not want to play? There was questions about him not wanting to play in the later games in 2020. I don't know the answers to those questions. That's the thing that Derek's going to have to answer this season and next with Houston, because that's the thing. It's really got to be the first round guys. It's really got to be the veterans in the locker room. People like that. The Derek Stingley Juniors, the stars of this team, of these squads for the next few years, who are going to have to be the guys. He may not be vocal, but he leads by example and at his best, at his strongest. And we got to see him do that. We got to see him do it, because it seems when he's in the mood, man, he can be just an absolute freak. But, I think something happened at LSU where he was just, you know what? I already put my body on the line for 1 season. I'm not doing it for 2. And, can you blame him with the money on the table and seeing, you know, third overall pick right there, tying, I think it was with Sean Springs for being just only the second ever cornerback picked third overall. So, Stingley, there's so many questions, but there's so many answers too.
Yeah, and when you go back to the 2019 season, obviously we've touched on Stingley, we'll come back to him before we wrap up, but Austin Deculus was a big part of that offensive line, predominantly, correct me if I'm wrong, Lonn, but at right tackle.
Mm-hmm.
What did you see as the season wrapped up before all the draft process and all the over analysis and the almost the kind of false narratives you see in the media and all this kind of stuff? But did you see Deculus as a viable draft pick?
You know, I I gotta be honest, I didn't. I really was kind of like, I think he might be an undrafted free agent. Um, there was just question marks about his technique, his ability, um, whether he was a right tackle or even a right guard. So many people throwing up a lot of different smoke, and then you saw him have some big whiffs this season, last season, but then you know, watching the film overall, he's really somebody who could actually have a lot of upside, because he defines what an offensive lineman needs to be. He's reliable. He's always there. 61 appearances for LSU, all-time appearances leader. But a 6 round pick was kind of surprising to me. But he's going home. He's going somewhere where he's very excited to be. He's very excited to be a part of this franchise. Very excited to be given this opportunity. And here's the thing: he will outlast you. He will play through injuries. He will gut it out. He appeared in more games than any LSU Tiger before him, and there's so many of those guys who were playing through some crazy injuries, crazy stuff, man. His final appearance just happened to be on the very field he's going to be playing his home games at, on Energy Stadium, in a game where there was so many LSU Tigers who were heading for the draft who were just quitting. They weren't going to play that game,
Hmm.
but he wanted in, and he definitely wanted to set some type of legacy at LSU. And it's about reliability, it's about impact, it's about dependability, it's about, you know how do you respond when things aren't going well? Deculus always responded well when things were going against him. When he would lose battles, he would respond and make this sick ass block on the edge the next play. Deculus, he was a key component. Say whatever you want. He was a key component of that, an ever present automatic starter for the greatest of all time national championship winning offense in college football history. I mean, they won the Joe Morta Award as well. You go through and you watch it. I think he grows as an offensive lineman in 2020 and 2021. I think he benefited big time from those seasons, and I think I think he had a hell of an impact. He was forced to mature very quickly in his game because so much, I think pretty much all the starters except for him and Ed Ingram from the 2019 offensive line went to the draft. And so from then on, it was basically him and Ed Ingram leading the way for that offensive line, very young offensive line, dealing with a ton of criticism, ton of stuff going their way, a ton of smoke going their way. So here's the thing, like they've seen it, he's dealt with it. He's been through hell and back at LSU, man. At Austin Deculus. He's seen everything. He's gone through everything you can go through as a football player. That's going to benefit him big time psychologically. I'm not saying he's going to come in there and take out this who was it? Your starting right tackle, Titus
Chris Howard,
Howard,
yep.
for your starter. I don't think he's going to be coming in there and bullying him out of his position. But if it happened, would it surprise me? No, because Deculus has that type of character, and I mean he kind of did it against Alabama this last season in 2019. He was really successful against Alabama's defenders, against Florida as well. Just he had some really strong games. Oklahoma was a great game, of course. Georgia in that SEC championship game, very key game. And then you looked at the production of someone like Clyde Edwards-Helaire running right off of his right hip, running right off of the inside of his left knee. Clyde always ran everyone. I swear to God, like 70% of his rushes in that season were through Deculus.
Mm.
Ed Ingram a lot of times or Cushionberry, but it was usually led off that right or a pulling Austin Deculus, which is another thing. In movement, Austin Deculus, I feel like that's where he's his strongest, man, is where you let him dictate the mismatch. You let him kind of change the angle of the defensive lineman coming at him. He
Mm.
doesn't have to square up, and it's going to be this constant, you know, mano a mano battle. You just kind of use the pulling movements, and you can go to town with Austin Deculus. I think he really has an interesting future. I'm not going to say that he's going to be a bona fide, you know, Pro Bowler year in year out, but I wouldn't be surprised if he carved himself out a nice 10-year career in the NFL.
Well, that's it. I think he's certainly I think his best chance would be, going up against AJ Cann, who we signed over from Jacksonville, who, reasonable money. So I think he'll have time to develop and acclimatise to the demands. But if he can pull and come around, the other side and transfer that mass, the power at the point of attack and make holes in the running game, I think that's exactly what we need. So, it's good to hear that he's got that's his necessarily strength, because, with Kenyon Green expected to slot in at the left guard spot, if he can, challenge for the right spot and, provide as a swing tackle or emergency backup tackle he needs, then there's going to be a place for him on this squad. Obviously, Charlie Heck, from fourth round pick from Carolina from 2020, will be there to beat out, and a couple of other vets in there. But yeah, no, I think Deculus is an interesting guy who could see time, and within the next year, 18 months, if it's not this season. So yeah, we'll see. I think what's Austin like as a guy? What's to expect? Is he pretty? Is he your standard offensive lineman, or what's he like?
A little bit, but at the same time, he's got the long blonde flowing locks. He's kind of a wild dude. He's kind of a crazy, very extroverted guy.
Yeah.
He's someone who I think if he became a really successful player, or even here's the thing, he could become a captain just from his leadership role and ability. No matter how good he was on the offensive line or what string he was, I feel like he could be a face of the franchise anyway. He's that gregarious. He's that just on point. His tone is always right. He's always a fun dude. Deculus, especially if he becomes, a perennial Pro Bowler type of player, like if that happens, if that were to happen, I think Deculus, he's got the right character for that type of stuff to handle it. At the same time, I mean, he's a fun dude. I just remember hearing a lot of great stuff about him where it was always positive about Deculus. Really. I mean, I heard a lot of positive and negative about a lot of different guys. We just went through the positive and negative of Derek Stingley Jr. But now you go with Austin Deculus, someone who doesn't have all the pedigree and didn't have all the luster before the draft, but was given an opportunity. And I think he's someone who could really like take advantage of that and maximize that because of the setting and the environment at Houston, a place he's comfortable with, a place he's from. I think, yeah, Deculus, he's got a very aggressive, mean, and nasty mindset on the field, though. Like he will absolutely mess fools up, man. I mean, there's some cool highlights from him, especially in 2019 when he was clearing people out for Clyde. 2021 as well, where he's clearing people out for Ty Davis Price. There's some punishing hits he put last year.
There's a play where I think it's an interception. I think he chases it down and tackles the ball carrier and throws him about there. I think I don't know if it was a penalty. I just saw the clip of the All-22, but it looked like it could have been a penalty. But yeah, just the fight and the football aggression, I think was clear to see on that clip. So no, I think it's great context on Deculus. Lonn. I think we're kind of clear where he is. I think when we drafted Derek Stingley, I said it, I thought it could have the widest range of outcomes from being a Pro Bowler, an All-Pro type guy because he was the most heralded cornerback position a long, long time. A player, as he said, not a position that necessarily gets drafted that high, but a guy who just had everything that everybody assumed and knew from an early age when he's training with LSU at 17 to, after their bowl game to then declaring 3 seasons later, albeit 2 kind of taken away by injury. But if you were to kind of project what these next sort of 3 to 4 years as a pro to be, where can you see it ending up? What would be your most likely outcome or your most likely expectation for Stingley at this level?
Man, that's a tough question. You put me on the spot there, man. Oof. Well, Stingley, I wouldn't be surprised if, like, say, he made 1 Pro Bowl out of 4 years. That I think that's like a very conservative, appropriate kind of expectation. But at the same time, like, I think Houston might be, might be the perfect environment where he can actually take over and become that type of guy who could be all 4 years of Pro Bowl, or he could be a rookie type Pro Bowler. He might be inspired by these recent Tigers who've gone in the NFL, Joe Burrow, Jamar Chase, all these guys, his teammates, Justin Jefferson, of course, just gone in and just dominated. Lloyd Cushenberry, I mean, no one even talks about him or Damian Lewis, but they start every game since they've been rookies for the Broncos and the Seahawks on their offensive line. So, like, people haven't really talked about LSU's offensive linemen going in the NFL because they haven't been sexy, but like that's just with Deculus there. That's in the background. But with Stingley, Stingley Jr. is the sexy, huge, big name that everyone was wanting to talk about whenever it came to LSU's draft this year. Seemed like it was just Stingley and a bunch of other guys that we'll figure out about. And I Stingley, yeah, he is interesting as hell, and I think he's going to be a player who's going to do great things in his career. It would be an intense shame, a divine, savage mishap if he did not turn good into a perennial Pro Bowl type of player, like say Tre'Davious White, his DBU forefather, Patrick Peterson, Tyrann Mathieu. It would be an absolute shame of dismay if he did not become like those guys, at least in some capacity, in his own way. In the Stingley way. I'm not expecting him to be those guys, but it's very up into what Houston does front office wise in surrounding him to put him in the best situation to succeed. Do you think Stingley, with what's around him in the secondary, I'm not exactly sure who you guys have surrounding him in the secondary.
No one is the answer. Yeah.
Okay, so Stingley's basically going to be on his own, kind of in a rebuilding process here. You're saying, right?
100%. Yeah.
Okay, that's something that I can see some growing pains with, some struggles, some kind of tug of war. But I think in the end, when Houston's going to be forced to kind of really make a decision if they want to continue with Stingley or cut ties a third or fourth season, possibly, I think they're going to be pushed into making a decision to kind of surround him with the right talent. And I think they're going to do that on defense, hopefully, and to propel him, jettison him to being a perennial Pro Bowler type player, which he absolutely should be.
Yeah, I think, I said that right after the draft and talked about it subsequently. There's going to be a lack of pass rush up front. We've signed some veterans who will, play roles and have packages and what have you. But yeah, there'll be some welcome. I think we talked about this last week. Guys from the SEC don't think they need it, but they will have a welcome to the league moment. And yeah, you expect growth pains, every corner gets beat, and it will happen. But yeah, I think the raw talent is obviously there. Where do you rank them in terms of all those guys you mentioned, Trey White and Ty Matthew and all those kind of guys, Pat P? Is a raw talent, is he better than that?
I raw talent, damn, that's a very interesting question because raw talent, you can make an argument. I've heard Ryan Clark make it, and one of the legendary LSU DBs, double Super Bowl winner with the Steelers, Ryan Clark. He made that argument that Stingley was the best raw talent cornerback ever at LSU or DB overall. For me, Tyrann Mathieu is the GOAT. Unstoppable. Just someone who, in such little time, in such a small window, affected so much. I mean, led college football in forced fumbles as a freshman, and then set the all-time record just in his sophomore season. Did all sorts of crazy things, scoring touchdowns in crazy, ludicrous ways, being a Heisman candidate, potentially really winning some huge awards in that season if he would have been able to come back. Tre'Davious White, I cannot say that Stingley is better than Tre'Davious White after what he's done both college and NFL, as well in special teams too. Tre'Davious White was unbelievable with special teams. Stingley never had a return touchdown at LSU. Tre'Davious White did that, I think, in multiple seasons. So like Stingley, for me, he might have to be fourth or fifth, sixth on the all-time list, maybe even deeper at this point when you're talking about guys like Corey Webster, who you just have to respect. I mean, there is a recency bias. Stingley did have 6 interceptions as a freshman. Stingley, incredible playmaker. But on that all-time list, I mean, one thing about Stingley, though, that people do not talk about is his ability to respond, from adversity. Let's talk about that Florida game in 2019. He's getting picked on by Kyle Trask. Kyle Trask is picking on him with Van Jefferson, and Van Jefferson is just going to town on him. Van Jefferson scores a touchdown on him. And it's looking like Stingley's having the freshman blues, and he's going to just fill his pants up, and LSU are going to lose this game to Florida, and we're going to have our first loss of the season at home to the Gators. Embarrassing. Instead, Stingley absolutely pulls it together and makes an unbelievable game-sealing interception in the end zone after making a few other brilliant pass breakups to give Joe Burrow back the football, which means an automatic touchdown that season. So it's Stingley turned that game around just as much as he, made some poor decisions and had some poor coverages that almost cost us the game. Made it a awesome game. That's the thing that happens at being a DB. You're going to win some, you're going to lose some. And Stingley, I think he has the mentality and the character. He was born to be in the NFL, man. None of this will phase him.
Yeah, I think so. And hopefully, for the first time probably ever since a couple of years of the prime of Jonathan Joseph, still he's taken Jonathan Joseph's number 24. He played his best ball, number 24, and hopefully we can have a shutdown type of guy who can make teams adjust their route patterns, how they attack a defense, and influence a game from that position, because if you can, those guys are rare and special. And we hope we've got that. But looking forward to it, Lon, this year to see where he goes. It will be tough at times. You can't hide from that. But I suppose it's how much does he want it, and if he's got plenty in the tank to go and raise his game, and he's been prepping for this, then let's see what you got, Derek. Because we're looking forward to see, because you will be tested and he will be tested regularly. But looking forward to seeing how he gets on this year. In terms of Texans in the draft, more relevant with a number of picks over the next couple of years. Is there any guys from the LSU program that you expect to declare for the 2023 draft that people should be keeping an eye on?
Oh, for sure. Kayshon Boutte, for sure going to be a top 10 receiver. Um, I mean, he's maybe even a top 10, he's going to be a top 10 receiver on pretty much every mock draft across the board. You're going to see him thrown in there next to Jordan Addison. Everyone's going to be talking about him, but I really do believe he is a top 10 pick potential, Kayshon Boutte. He's just, his yards after catch ability is just out of this world. And we haven't even seen Boutte at his best. He's got like 15 touchdowns in 16 games or 14 in 15 games, one or the other. And he just unbelievable 300-yard game, record-setting SEC receiving yards. It just as a freshman, just a freak, Kayshon Boutte. We haven't even seen him at his best. I really expect him to be a first-round pick. You know, it's with LSU. You're going to see Ali Gay, B.J. Ojolari on the defensive line, be those guys who are going to declare for the draft as well. Who were Ali Gay was close to declaring for the draft this last time and did not, just barely. Mike Jones Jr. Mike Jones Jr. at linebacker, who was once a Clemson transfer, won a national championship at Clemson, lost a national championship to LSU at Clemson. Now he comes to LSU. This is his second season at LSU. If he has a huge breakout season at linebacker, I could see him definitely going into the draft as well. At corner, Mekhi Garner, who's coming in, transferring from, I believe, ULM, University of Louisiana Monroe. And, probably doesn't really sound very sexy right there, hearing that off the top, ULM, Mekhi Garner. But at the same time, man, you watch him, even in Brian Kelly's words, he called him an NFL cornerback. And you watched him. I saw him at spring practice, covering spring practices, just barely this last month. This last few months, he was unbelievable out there. Yes, he got beat on a few plays, but he responded like just against an unbelievable receiving core as well. Really stacked receiving core. So Mekhi Garner is one to definitely watch as well. There's a variety of guys, offensive linemen and defensive linemen, who some transfers as well, who have some eligibility, who maybe one more year, like Joe Fouché what will he become, going into the draft? He has a great resume at Arkansas. Can he, turn that into some maximum cash at LSU and some maximum high draft, stock? Jay Ward at safety, man. Jay Ward, he was a member of that 2019 team. Jay Ward has led the team in pass breakups more than Derek Stingley. I think almost double the number of Derek Stingley over the last 2 years, from Jay Ward with 10. He had a pick six against against Ole Miss. Had an interception against Florida. 2 interceptions, I believe, against Ole Miss. He's a big time playmaker, Jay Ward. He almost decapitated Bryce Young this this last season. Jay Ward, he was a corner on that 2019 team, and then corner for a little bit of 2020, transitions into safety for 2021. It's very interesting the trajectory his career has taken, going from corner to safety and taking so well to it. It's been quite incredible. Jaquelin Roy at DT, this guy is an absolute freak. Jaquelin Roy, he's got some Glenn Dorsey vibes, man. I mean, Glenn Dorsey, he never really amounted to too much, I guess, in the NFL, sadly, because of some injuries. But and that prevented that from happening. But at the college level, man, he was an absolute freak. Jaquelin Roy, he has the same vibe where I feel like potentially he could do that.
Yeah,
Jaquelin Roy puts up a lot of crazy numbers. He's someone that's definitely, I think, top round potential material as well.
yeah. Well, a lot to look out for, and I think when you start to find lineages with programs and front office personnel staff who find schools that treat them well and serve them well, they'll often go back to the well. So I think everybody should be keeping an eye out on LSU football this year. But Lonn, it's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you very much for what a wonderful insight into Louisiana State University. Thank you very much, mate. I much appreciate your time.
No problem, brother. Thank you so much for having me. Uh, Take it easy.
Yeah, appreciate it, man. Thank you very much.